All right, so I've seen Captain America Brave New World. I got up extra early today for a screening at 10:30. Got some breakfast beforehand, got to the theater, and the movie started 45 minutes late. We're already off to a great start, guys. But when it comes to this movie, there's been so much discourse online for a variety of reasons. You know, people talking about the reshoots, rewrites, the budget. Some people not feeling Sam Wilson as Captain America. Some people coming off of being disappointed from Falcon and Winter Soldier, which I totally understand. But for me, this one was solid. It wasn't great. It was good. It's for sure not the trash fest that I know a lot of people are expecting from this movie, but there were a lot of choices made that made me want more from both a storytelling and character standpoint. First off, Anthony Mackie, I feel, does a really good job in the role of Captain America, Sam Wilson. He led the movie really well, demonstrated himself as a capable leader, and as always, brought his charisma. Harrison Ford as Thaddeus Ross slash the Red Hulk, I also thought was a pretty good character. There are some character elements that I feel were like, okay, what are we doing here? But overall, I really liked what they did with him. Danny Ramirez as Joaquin Torres slash the new Falcon was honestly a lot better than I was expecting. He had me a little bit worried in the first 15 or so minutes of the movie. He came across as kind of annoying, and a lot of the quips that he was pulling off were just not very funny, which I will get into the humor later. But he ended up being a pretty well-rounded character that I thoroughly enjoyed, and honestly am expecting to see more of him in the future, and I wouldn't say no to that. Giancarlo Esposito, while good in the movie, basically has nothing to do. He's super underutilized. I mean, he left me wishing for so much more, not only from a character standpoint, just everything that they introduced with the Serpent Society. I felt like there was so much potential there, but it kind of went nowhere. And honestly, I have no idea why he was so excited to play this character. He said if he was going to join the MCU, it had to be something really good, something that he could really gravitate towards. And I don't know what he saw, but there wasn't much of that in this movie. Like I said, he's good. The scenes that we get of him and his character are good, but there's just not simply enough here for me to be like, oh yeah, I want an entire show with this guy. Just like he was saying he's going to have a show. Like, I don't see any indication of that happening. Carl Lumley and Shara Haas's characters, Ruth and Isaiah, also fell into that category of me wanting more from them not really having much to do. They were good in the scenes that they were given, but they just simply didn't have enough for me to be like, okay, yeah, I want to see more of them. So while everyone was pretty good in the movie, there were for sure some story elements and character elements in particular with these characters that I wish they had spent more time on. Especially Isaiah Bradley. I mean, he has some really good scenes with Anthony Mackie, and the scenes that he's in, he steals the show, but I was expecting more and hoping to get more from his character here. As for the storyline, I mean, it's nothing groundbreaking, it's nothing super inventive, but it was good. It was just fine, if I'm being honest. As I briefly mentioned earlier, the beginning of the movie had me extremely worried. That clip of Sam fighting the dude from the Serpent Society perfectly demonstrates, for the most part, what the tone and the feel of the first 15 or so minutes was. So up until a certain point, I was rather concerned about how it was going to play out. But after a certain something happens in the movie, it finds its footing and is off to the races from there. At times, it did feel a little TV show-esque. It kind of felt like a super long season finale or series finale to the Falcon and Winter Soldier. The pacing's pretty rough in some places, and there are some scenes that I'm just like, okay, what is this adding to the overall story or narrative to some of these characters? And that's why I am kind of pissed off at them for not giving more room and time for some of these characters. I mean, this is an hour and 59-minute movie, I think. I feel like there could have been an extra 10 or 15 minutes that we could spend with these characters, but at the same time, there were some pacing issues where it really slowed down. So I'm kind of conflicted on that front. And I've heard some other people say this as well, and I completely agree. This feels more like an Incredible Hulk sequel than it does a Captain America movie. And while I also agree with people who are saying that this movie purely exists to wrap up loose ends from movies like The Incredible Hulk and The Eternals and so on, it does tie in rather nicely. It wraps up most of those storylines or elements in a rather satisfying way and gives them more room to build towards the future without having to worry about those down the line. The VFX is rather good. I mean, there are some shots, as per typical Marvel, that made me go, yikes, that didn't look very good, but for the most part, it looked really good. In particular, though, the flight sequences, the aerial combat scenes with Falcon and Captain America are done really well in the movie. I'm seeing this in D-Box 3D tomorrow with some friends, so I'm excited to see this in more of an enhanced medium. As for the other action sequences in the movie, they were good. Like, they were fine. I mean, like I said, the first 15 minutes had me pretty worried. That fight scene with the dude in the Serpent Society is rough. But with those aerial combat scenes and what we see later on with the Red Hulk, it really did turn itself around. And pertaining to that scene with the Red Hulk, it was very, very short. It left me wanting a lot more, but it was really cool to finally see. Unfortunately, though, whenever it comes to the humor, as I briefly mentioned earlier, almost all of it feels forced. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't chuckle a couple of times, but this is the most forced the humor has felt in recent MCU history. As for other things I wanted to talk about, I did leave the leader off the list because I did want to give him a little bit of his own time as to different things I wanted to talk about regarding his character and that storyline. Because while Tim Blake Nelson gives a good performance in this movie, he, aside from Isaiah Bradley, is the one character that I wanted more from. Everything from him just kind of felt one-noted, flat, and all of the hype that they were building behind him and his character for this movie felt kind of exaggerated. And while this is a spoiler-free review, I'm briefly going to touch on the post-credit scene. There is only one post-credit scene, so if you guys don't want spoilers for that, there's really not that much to spoil, if I'm being honest. But if you don't want spoilers for that, you guys can back out now. I totally understand. But this one was kind of just underwhelming, to be honest. It's about as vague as a setup as they could give for the next Avengers movie. It's basically just Sam going to see the leader on the raft, and he warns Sam about the coming conflict, but it's executed in a way that just feels so flat. And I saw other people mention this as well, and I did agree. But it did feel like they had shot that before they fired Jonathan Majors and changed Kang to Doom and all of that, because it is just so vague in the wording and the dialogue that you really don't know what he's talking about. And he says he says something along the lines of, like, you should be worried about the others, which is clearly referring to the Council of Kangs. I don't know. Maybe he was talking about the other worlds, as he kind of is briefly mentioning or alluding to the multiverse. But to me, upon first watch, it felt like he was alluding to Kang. And that post-credits scene brings me to a point that really doesn't have anything to do with the movie, but how they are going about setting up Doomsday in the future of this franchise. Because these movies just don't have the cohesive connectiveness feeling that they used to, especially when you look back at how they built up the Infinity Saga going into Infinity War and Endgame. I really don't want to get dragged into a whole tirade of I've already gone through before, but this is just one of those things that has really been bugging me since Endgame in the MCU. Nothing feels as connected as it used to. Overall, though, I'd say that this was a good movie. I think that it was fine. It's nothing mind-blowing, nor does it really compare to the other Captain America movies, in my opinion. But it did its job in keeping me entertained and keeping me wanting more from the MCU in the future. Anthony Mackie really carries this movie, and I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing him as the leader of the Avengers coming up in Doomsday next year. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Have you seen the movie yet? If you guys have, feel free to discuss in a spoiler-free-ish manner. I don't want people to get the wrong idea and just go crazy with spoilers just because I talked about the post-credit scene, even though I really don't think there's that much to spoil. But feel free to give me your thoughts down below. If you're new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button, like button, turning on post notifications. Whatever you guys want to do to support the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. So hopefully you did enjoy, and I will see you all in the next one.